During a family gathering, my husband's parent pointed at me and said, "She'll never be a real member of this family." My husband said nothing. I stood, looked them dead in the eye, and said, "Then I guess it's time you met your real daughter-in-law. We eloped last week." Their faces were priceless. You don't always know the exact moment your life changes. Sometimes it creeps up on you. And sometimes it slaps you across the face in front of 20 people holding plastic cups of sweet tea. My name's Cassandra Brooks. Most people just call me Cassie. I'm 35 years old, a freelance graphic designer living in Raleigh, North Carolina. Pretty normal life, work deadlines, messy hair buns, coffee cups half drank on every surface. I met Kyle Mason 4 years ago at a trivia night downtown. He was the guy who knew every useless fact about 80s music and laughed so hard at his own jokes it was impossible not to laugh with him. He wasn't perfect. He left socks everywhere, thought ketchup counted as a vegetable, and snored like a freight train on bad nights. But he loved me. Or so I thought. Meeting his family was something else. The Masons weren't cruel exactly. They were polite. In that cold, clinical way that said, "We're smiling because we have to, not because we want to." His mom, Joyce, was a retired school principal who still looked at everyone like they might need detention. His dad, Dennis, was quieter, but his silence felt more like judgment than shyness. First time I went to Sunday dinner, Joyce asked if I wanted her to explain how to properly set the table, since you probably didn't grow up doing it. I smiled, bit my tongue, told myself they'd come around. That was my first mistake. Over the years, it never really got better. Joyce found fault with everything: the way I dressed, the food I cooked, the fact that I worked from home instead of having a real job. Dennis barely spoke to me at all unless it was about sports, and even then it was more like talking at me than with me. Kyle always brushed it off. "They're old-fashioned," he said. "They'll warm up." Except they didn't. Not even after Kyle proposed. Not even after I bent over backward trying to be the good fiancé. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Joyce wanted a full Catholic mass. Dennis wanted it at the country club where Kyle's cousin had gotten married. They wanted a guest list 3 times what we could afford, with people I had never even met. Every time I pushed back, Kyle would sigh and say, "Can't we just make them happy?" And every time, a little piece of me wondered if making them happy would always matter more than protecting me. After one especially bad dinner, where Joyce suggested that maybe it was better if we waited a few years before having kids, just in case it didn't work out, Kyle and I fought all the way home. "I'm marrying you, not them," he snapped. "Then act like it." I fired back. He pulled the car over, resting his forehead on the steering wheel, breathing hard. "I don't know how to make you all happy," he whispered. I looked at him, really looked, and realized maybe he didn't know how to make me happy either. Maybe he didn't even realize that was supposed to be part of it. 3 weeks later, we eloped. Just me, him, a judge who looked like he was late for golf, and 2 strangers we grabbed as witnesses at the courthouse in downtown Raleigh. No flowers. No first dance. No arguments about seating charts. Just vows. Simple. Quiet. Ours. I cried. Kyle cried. For a little while, I thought maybe we'd made it. Maybe love could actually drown out all the noise. Then came the family gathering. It was supposed to be a casual cookout. A chance to celebrate the engagement we hadn't announced was already a marriage. Kyle wanted to tell them that day, figured they'd be more relaxed with a burger in hand. I wasn't so sure. The Masons didn't really do relaxed. But I agreed. For him. For us. The backyard smelled like charcoal and grass clippings. Tables were set up with plastic tablecloths that Joyce had borrowed from the church. Dennis was manning the grill, flipping burgers with military precision. Cousins I barely knew mingled around, balancing plates of potato salad and ribs. Kyle clinked his cup and cleared his throat. Everyone turned toward us. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. "Hey everyone," Kyle said, flashing that easy smile. "Thanks for coming. We've got some news." That's when Joyce cut him off. Literally pointed at me like a prosecutor in court. And said, clear as a bell, "She'll never be a real member of this family." The world stopped. My hands went cold around the cup I was holding. Kyle said nothing. Not a word. Just stared at the ground like maybe it would swallow him. I looked at him. Waited. Begged him silently to say something. To stand up. To choose me. But he didn't. And in that frozen, terrible silence, I realized exactly where I stood. Exactly who I was marrying into. Exactly what my future would look like if I stayed silent too. I set my cup down carefully on the table, straightened my shoulders, looked Joyce dead in the eye, and said, with a smile so sweet it could have cut glass, "Then I guess it's time you met your real daughter-in-law." Joyce's mouth opened, confused. Kyle finally looked up, blinking. Dennis's burger flipped right off the grill onto the grass. I pulled out my hand, the one with the simple silver band Kyle had slid onto it 3 weeks earlier. Held it up high. We eloped last week, I said. Their faces? Priceless. You know those moments when the world feels like it's holding its breath? Where the sunlight is still shining and the birds are still chirping, but somehow everything feels off, like the earth knows something's about to shatter. That's exactly what it felt like. Standing there in the middle of a backyard in Raleigh, surrounded by potato salad and lemonade and folding chairs, while the man I thought I could trust stared at the ground like a child caught stealing candy. And his mother, Joyce, pointed at me like she was calling out a criminal. She'll never be a real member of this family, she said, her voice so sharp and clear it cut through all the easy chatter and laughter around us. Silence fell over the gathering like a heavy, wet blanket. Cousins stopped mid-bite. Aunt Marlene's wine glass froze halfway to her mouth. Dennis, Kyle's father, dropped the spatula he was holding, the burger sizzling forgotten on the grass. I looked at Kyle. Looked right at him. Waiting for him to open his mouth. Waiting for him to laugh awkwardly and say, "That's not true, Mom." Waiting for him to put a hand on my back and stand next to me. But he didn't. He just stood there, shoulders hunched, staring at the toes of his shoes like they had the answers he didn't know how to find. My heart didn't break. Not exactly. It hardened. Right there. Right then. In the middle of a party that was supposed to be about celebrating us. I could feel every eye in that yard swinging between Joyce and me, waiting to see what would happen next. Waiting to see if I would smile and stay quiet like a good little outsider. But I wasn't that girl. Not anymore. I set my plastic cup down carefully on the nearest table, the thud of it against the plastic sounding loud in the heavy silence. I smoothed the front of my dress blue, not white, feeling the thin silver band on my finger catch slightly on the fabric. And then I looked Joyce dead in the eye. No fear. No shame. Just done. Then I guess it's time you met your real daughter-in-law, I said, my voice even, almost gentle. Joyce blinked, confused for half a heartbeat. Dennis's jaw actually dropped. Kyle's head snapped up, his eyes wide with something between panic and horror. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that had nothing to do with joy and everything to do with finally choosing myself. We eloped last week, I said, lifting my hand so the simple silver ring caught the afternoon light. The gasps came almost in unison. Some sharp and scandalized, some soft with disbelief. Aunt Marlene's wine glass finally tipped, spilling a bright red stain down her floral blouse. Dennis muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. Joyce went rigid, the kind of stiff that made it seem like if she moved, she might crack into 1,000 angry little pieces. Kyle opened his mouth finally, but no sound came out. Just a choked little breath like he was realizing exactly how badly he had screwed up. I turned slightly, facing the entire gathering. Nothing big, I said lightly, as if we were talking about the weather. Just us. Courthouse downtown. Simple ceremony. No drama. My voice was sweet enough to make teeth rot. Joyce recovered first. She marched toward me, heels stabbing into the soft grass, her mouth drawn so tight it looked painful. You did this without us? She spat, her voice shaking. Without your blessing, yes, I said, smiling wider. Turns out, I don't need permission to marry someone who's supposed to love me. Another murmur from the guests. Someone at the back, Kyle's cousin Tara, actually let out a low whistle. Kyle finally found his voice. Bree, you said you wanted them to be part of it. I turned to him, slow and deliberate. I said I wanted a family to be part of it, I said. Not an audience. He flinched like I'd hit him. Joyce let out a bitter laugh. This won't last, she said coldly. You're not one of us. You'll never be. I tilted my head, considering her. You're right, I said simply. I'm not one of you. I paused. And I've never been more grateful for anything in my life. Joyce's face flushed an angry red, her jaw working furiously like she was chewing on 1,000 insults at once, but couldn't spit them out fast enough. Dennis finally moved, stepping forward as if to put a hand on her arm, but she shrugged him off like he was part of the problem too. You think you're so clever, she snapped, her voice low but sharp enough that even the people at the tables closest to us leaned in to hear. You think this little stunt makes you part of this family? I didn't flinch. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't move a muscle. I don't need to be part of your family, I said calmly. I have my own now. I glanced at Kyle when I said it. Watched him squirm under the weight of the truth. Because even now, even after everything, he still hadn't spoken up. Still hadn't chosen a side. Still hadn't chosen me. The silence dragged on, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Dennis cleared his throat. Joyce, maybe we should all just sit down, he mumbled, half-heartedly. She rounded on him. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, she hissed. Dennis looked away, his shoulders sagging. A lifetime of battles lost in the face of her anger. And in that moment, watching them, I saw our future, mine and Kyle's, if I stayed. If I kept swallowing myself down to fit into a family that didn't want me. If I kept waiting for Kyle to be a man who could stand tall next to me, instead of hiding behind the skirts of his mother's fury. Kyle finally stepped toward me, his hands raised in a pathetic sort of plea. Bree, please, he said. Let's just go. We'll talk about this later. I stared at him. The man I had promised forever to. The man who couldn't even find the words to defend me when it mattered most. And I realized, with cold, aching clarity, that if I went with him now, it would always be like this. Me, standing alone. Him, standing nowhere. I straightened my spine, set my shoulders, met his eyes one last time. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said softly. He blinked, stunned. But we're married, he said, like that was supposed to mean something unbreakable. I smiled, small, sad, and sure. For now. The murmurs around us rose, the shock of my words rippling through the backyard like a stone thrown into still water. Joyce let out a triumphant little huff, like she thought she had won. Like she thought chasing me off would somehow make her world whole again. She didn't realize yet. She hadn't won anything. She had lost the only person who had been willing to love them despite themselves. I turned, walking slowly across the yard, my bare feet silent on the grass. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name. And with every step I took, I felt lighter, freer, stronger. At the edge of the yard, just past the last table, my maid of honor and best friend, Elise, was waiting. She didn't say anything, just held out her car keys with a small, fierce nod. I took them, squeezing her hand briefly before sliding into the passenger seat. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. There was nothing worth seeing, nothing worth saving. Just the faint hum of laughter from people who didn't know they were laughing at the ashes of their own cruelty. Elise didn't ask questions right away. She just drove, one hand steady on the wheel, the other flipping the turn signal with quiet, familiar ease. We ended up at her apartment, a third-floor walk-up just outside downtown Raleigh that smelled like fresh laundry and old books. I followed her inside, feeling like my body was moving but my heart was somewhere 2 miles back, still stuck in that backyard. Still stuck waiting for Kyle to be someone he wasn't. She handed me a glass of water, and I sank onto her worn leather couch. For a while, we didn't speak. Just sat there with the low hum of her ancient fridge buzzing in the background. Finally, Elise broke the silence. You okay? I let out a soft, bitter laugh. I will be, I said. And it wasn't a lie. Not exactly. Because the truth was, something inside me had shifted today. Something that wasn't going to shift back. My phone buzzed on the coffee table between us. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Kyle. I ignored it. Let it buzz itself into silence. A few minutes later, it started again, this time a voicemail. Elise picked up the phone, glanced at it, and set it face down without a word. I smiled at her, tired but grateful. Later that night, curled up under one of Elise's oversized throw blankets, I finally listened. Kyle, voicemail Bree, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I never wanted it to be like this. I love you. We can fix this. Just call me. Please. His voice cracked on the last word. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel tempted. I just felt done. The next morning, he showed up in person. I opened the door just a crack. He looked awful, like he hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't figured out how to fix what couldn't be fixed. Cassie, he said, his voice breaking. Please. I leaned my head against the doorframe, studying him. This man I had planned a life with. This man I had bent myself around like a tree growing around a fence post, just trying to fit. And suddenly, I didn't see the boy who made me laugh over trivia questions. I saw the man who stood silent while his family tore me down. I saw the man who would always choose peace over partnership, comfort over courage, them over me. I'm not coming back, I said quietly. His face crumpled. Don't throw us away, he said. You threw it away when you stood there and said nothing, I said. The tears came then, hot and fast down his cheeks. He didn't even try to wipe them away. I can change, he said desperately. I'll stand up to them. I swear. Just give me a chance. I shook my head slowly. I gave you 4 years of chances. He reached for me, but I stepped back, putting the door between us like a shield. I hope you find what you're looking for, Kyle, I said softly. But it's not me. I closed the door gently. Not slamming it. Not in anger. In finality. Because some doors aren't meant to stay open. Some loves aren't meant to be saved. After the door clicked shut, I just stood there for a minute, forehead resting against the cool wood. No tears. No second guessing. Just a deep, bone-deep exhaustion I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Elise came around the corner, holding 2 mugs of coffee. One look at my face and she handed one over without a word. I took it, wrapping my hands around the warmth, feeling it seep into my fingers. "Well?" she asked quietly. I blew out a long breath. "It's done," I said. And it was. Not in a dramatic movie scene way. Not in a crash and burn way. Just done. Like a book you finally close after realizing the ending was never going to change no matter how long you stared at the last page. The days that followed were quiet. No more calls. No more texts. Kyle must have finally gotten the message. Or maybe he was just doing what he always did, slipping away when things got too hard. Either way, I didn't chase him. I didn't explain myself. I didn't apologize for choosing peace. I moved into a small apartment downtown a few weeks later. 1 bedroom. Tiny kitchen. Big windows that caught the morning light. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't anything I had dreamed about when I thought of building a life with someone. But it was mine. Every throw pillow. Every chipped coffee mug. Every inch of messy, imperfect space. Mine. I went back to work, designing logos and websites for small businesses, meeting deadlines with the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from focusing on something you can actually control. I spent weekends walking the trails at Umstead State Park, breathing in the clean, piney air. Started cooking for myself again, real meals, not just grabbing takeout between meetings and family obligations. I remembered what it felt like to be me. Not someone's girlfriend. Not someone's fiancé. Not someone trying to fit into a mold that was never shaped for her in the first place. Just Cassie. And it felt good. Really, really good. One Saturday morning, I was walking through the farmer's market with a fresh coffee in one hand and a bag of vegetables slung over my shoulder when I saw him. Kyle. Standing near a stand selling homemade candles, looking lost. Thinner. Paler. Older, somehow. He saw me too. For a second, we just stood there, the crowd moving around us like we were rocks in a stream. He smiled, small, hesitant, like he was hoping I would give him a sign. A wave. A nod. Something. I didn't. I just gave him a polite, distant smile. The kind you give a stranger you once passed on the street. And then I turned away, my bag swinging against my hip, the morning sun warm on my shoulders. I didn't look back. Didn't check to see if he was still standing there. Didn't wonder if he regretted everything. Because by then, it didn't matter. It wasn't my job to carry his regret. It wasn't my responsibility to fix the broken parts of him he had refused to face when I needed him most. That weight wasn't mine anymore. I spent the rest of the morning wandering through the market, picking out fresh flowers for my tiny kitchen table and a jar of local honey just because it made me happy. Small things. Quiet joys. The kind of life I never could have had if I stayed. Weeks turned into months. The seasons shifted, spring edging into a soft, sticky Carolina summer. I made new routines. Sunday mornings reading on the balcony. Thursday nights trying, and usually failing, to recreate complicated recipes I found online. Long drives down country roads with the windows down and the music too loud. Simple things. Ordinary things. But they were mine. One evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment surrounded by half-finished canvas paintings and half-empty wine glasses, I realized something. I didn't miss him. Not the way I thought I would. I didn't miss the weight of trying to be enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. I didn't miss shrinking myself to fit into spaces too small to hold the kind of love I deserved. I didn't miss being invisible. I found myself. Piece by piece. Laugh by laugh. Morning by morning. And the best part? No one could take that from me. Not Joyce. Not Dennis. Not Kyle. Not anymore. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or fight or force them to see what they lost. Living well, fully, peacefully, joyfully was the only revenge I needed. And every time I laughed with friends who loved me just as I was. Every time I painted something messy and bright just because it made my heart happy. Every time I woke up in a bed I chose, in a life I built, without a knot of dread in my chest. That was the real victory. So when people asked if I regretted how everything turned out, I just smiled. Not even a little, I said. Because sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from the fire, head high, heart whole, future wide open. And never look back.